Hi there, I'm Marissa Pendlebury and welcome back to the Nourishing Routes channel, where I show you how to love food, adore your body and become your authentic self during recovery from an eating disorder. Now in this week's video I'm going to be talking about a little bit of a controversial topic or a taboo issue, which is all about how to get your period back in recovery from an eating disorder, no matter for how long you've lost it for. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is because I went a full 10 or 11 years without ever having a period, and I want to share with you how I was able to get mine back, the research that supports that, and how I can maybe help you to get yours back as well. So obviously if you've clicked on this video, I'm guessing that probably 99% of you are women, because I'm guessing most men out there don't have a period. So if you are a guy, this may not apply to you, but some of the topics we do cover in the video will apply to recovery from an eating disorder in general. Firstly, I'd like to just also point out a disclaimer that the advice I'm going to give here is mostly based on my personal experiences and my own research that I've done on the scientific literature around menstruation and getting your period back, and also eating disorders. So although a lot of it is evidence-based, it's based on my personal experience, what I know of other people who've lost their period and how they got them back. And so, you know, a lot of the advice I will talk about is hopefully applicable to you, but just remember that your body and lifestyle and your eating disorder recovery is completely unique. But hopefully, with some luck, you'll still find the video really, really helpful. So first of all, I'd just like to discuss how periods in general and getting them back in recovery can be quite a fearful issue to address. And this is because deep down, getting your period back might be associated with entering womanhood, and also in some ways being classified as a healthy individual. And even though periods are associated with lots and lots of health benefits and they're so vital, and I'll talk a few points about why that is in a moment, there can be so much fear around it for what it symbolises. And I know for myself during recovery, although I was being told all the time by doctors and family members and friends that, you know, it's really, really important that you eat more and gain a healthy weight and get your period back, part of me, one, didn't want the hassle of ever having a period again. Two, I was really, really scared of being classified as healthy, because in my mind I thought once my period comes back, then I'll be healthy and I won't need to recover anymore. And also, it meant entering womanhood. And for someone who struggled with an eating disorder from the ages of 12 and 13, like entering a female life and full womanhood felt massively scary and something I wasn't ready to enter yet. Other reasons why people can be fearful about getting their period back can be if they're sexually active and it acts as like quite a convenient form of contraception. But what I hope to help you understand in this video is that despite all those things, recovery and gaining your period back is really important. But also, if you do currently have your period, or when you do get your period back, that by no means means that your recovery journey has to stop, because this is just one factor in the recovery journey, and although it's a physical marker of health, it's not the full picture. And I know for myself and many others, it was years, or you know, it can be months and months or years later from after you first start your period again, that you can classify yourself as fully healthy, because there's lots and lots of mental work to do as well. So first, before diving in the topic a little bit deeper, let's have a look at why periods might be lost in the first place. So if you've gone through a period of starvation, whether that's simply going on a diet or going on a restrictive form of eating, or if you suffer from an eating disorder, then to the body and the mind, it feels as though it's in an unsafe environment. And for one, that can make the body feel at a subconscious level that it's at risk and in no way in a good place to be able to bear a child, which after all is why mostly periods are there in the first place. So it makes sense that if you're starving yourself, periods are one of the first things to stop, because it doesn't want to put you at a greater risk in life by having a baby, which takes up a lot of time, energy and resources. Also, the simple act of having a period anyway takes up a lot of nutrients in the body, such as iron when we have regular blood loss every month. And if you've got a deficit of energy or a deficit in a certain type of nutrient, then just like when your body shuts down its temperature, it will also shut down other mechanisms such as your period, just in order to save that little bit of extra energy. Another reason, which has come about in recent research, is that when your fat levels decrease, which can happen through dieting or if you've experienced a restrictive eating disorder, that also reduces the production of a hormone called leptin. Now, alongside estrogen, leptin has a really important role to play in experiencing regular periods. So even if you're at a healthy weight, for example, if you're not consuming enough fat or you don't have enough fat cells in the body that are optimal for your unique body, then itself can mess up your hormonal cycle and in turn your periods. Other things that can really play a negative role in stopping periods are stress, anxiety, worry, which tend to go alongside, hand in hand with an eating disorder, as well as over-exercising. And when I say over-exercising, that doesn't necessarily mean going pumping iron at the gym or running obsessively on a treadmill, but what it could mean is even overdoing it at yoga, walking obsessively around the block like I used to do. And these are lots of little things in my life that I didn't realise were negatively impacting my ability to get my period back until years later when I eventually got it back. Without further ado, let's look at some ways you can get your period back while also sharing some of my personal experiences too. So if we rewind a few years back to when I wasn't having my period, which had gone on for a period of 10 years and more, I'd kind of got to the stage where I'd given up hope on ever having a period. And I know it might sound strange to say, but part of me actually kind of liked the idea because, again, as I said, it seemed a lot of hassle. I knew lots of other people would moan about heavy periods and PMT, premenstrual tension, and it's just something that I never wanted until I started to think about the future and how in the future I may want to have children, or at least the choice to have children. And I also started to understand that periods play a vital role in things such as bone density. And because I already had osteoporosis at this point, I became fearful that if I didn't get my period back, as my gynaecologist had told me, I would continue this slow and steady decline in bone mass to the point where, you know, my shoulders would hunch over and I'd end up this old little decrepit woman walking down the street with no life. That really scared me. And also, I'd done a lot of work on myself psychologically at this point in time a few years ago, and I'd got to the point where even though I was at a healthy weight, I knew that in some respect I mustn't be mentally healthy because my body didn't feel safe enough to have a period. And on reflection, I can kind of understand why that may be. And when I say a few of these things, I hope that you can relate to them in some way. So although by doctor's standards I was now a healthy BMI and had done the work to get my weight up to an optimal level, I knew deep down that I was still suppressing my true optimal weight. Because although I was at a healthy BMI, I knew that Marissa actually wasn't very naturally really skinny and slim, which I still was at that time. And I was also still having and retaining a large number of restrictions around food. Because like so many people in recovery, I had followed a very strict plant-based clean eating diet that meant cutting out milk, dairy, eggs, all forms of refined carbohydrates. I was still very psychologically concerned about where I was going to eat next, what snacks I would take along with me. I got very anxious around unknown meals. I would also obsessively still count calories. It was just so it happened that I'd managed to eat enough over the years to finally regain a healthy amount of weight. But deep down, I hadn't really entered true or full recovery because I still had all these restrictions in tow. But on the outside, I looked visibly healthy, even though inside, I think I knew deep down that I really wasn't, and I wasn't really putting in the hard work to truly recover. And I think this played a massive role in not having a period, because I think the stress and anxiety around, you know, calculating my food intake, avoiding certain foods, even if some of it was for ethical reasons, I still had to consciously restrict my food intake. And for anyone who's ever had an eating disorder, that can just open a whole big can of worms into just trading one restrictive lifestyle for another. And to be honest, that's exactly what I did, even though I didn't really realise it at the time. When I could finally reflect on this properly, I decided that what I was going to have to do is properly experiment with myself. And even though it was a massively anxiety thing to do, I had to throw veganism in the bin. And this has been a very hard thing for me to admit over the years, because I became very passionate about veganism, and even though I do believe in animal welfare, I knew deep down that I wasn't really doing the best for my body. And also, being someone who still lived in the mode of restriction and had half of a body still inside the lines of an eating disorder, I knew that I had to break away from that movement. Also because there were a lot of kind of clean eating messages in there, and part of me was following it for disordered reasons as well as ethical reasons. So what I started to do gradually and slowly but surely was introduce animal products back into my diet. Although I didn't really include meat or fish, what I did include was eggs, dairy products, and started to completely disown the clean eating movement altogether, because I realised that completely conflicted with my value system anyway. So I just started to unveil the lid of restriction and say, I can eat anything and everything whenever I want, wherever I want, and not be contained by times, rules, restrictions, veganism, whatever. And that sounds like, oh, I just flicked a switch and it happened overnight, but let me tell you now, it did not happen overnight. This was a very long process over the course of at least 2 to 3 years. But I did find, once I'd started placing animal products back into my diet, as controversial as this may be, I started to feel much better mentally and psychologically. And I also got my first sign of a period back within the next couple of months. So I would say within the last 8 weeks of eating egg, I then soon got the first signs of a period back. And although they were quite and very irregular for the next year or so, I was still able to see how my diet and mindset had been disordered, because I'd not had a period for so long, and then by simply eating unrestrictedly, they came back, even if they were irregular to begin with. But over time, what allowed me to regain a regular period was to do things such as stopping obsessively exercising, which is, as I mentioned before, can be as simple as walking 3 or 4 times a day obsessively, having rituals and routines. And also I had to do a lot of mental work, not just around food, but also around, living a life that was creatively orientated and not simply work focused. Because I know a lot of people who know me will understand this when I say I was absolutely work obsessed, and I really wouldn't give myself a break. I wouldn't allow myself the time of day to read for pleasure and to do the things that I genuinely enjoyed. It was only by moving away from my old job, which was caught up in so many expectations and rituals and obsessions, as well as my eating disorder, that I was able to take a step back and ask myself, what do I want to do? So my advice here on a related note is to ask yourself, are you living a life, even if it's away from food, to your best abilities that's in line with your most creative and heartfelt self? So are you in a job that makes you anxious and stressed? And if you are, that's probably partly contributing to having a lack of periods, because as we know, stress, anxiety, high workloads, and feeling panic or not being able to care for your body fully can manifest itself in a loss of periods. Because deep down, at a very evolutionary level, your body's thinking, I'm in an unsafe world. I can't fully take care of myself because I have all these worries, and I'm in a no man's zone for ever producing a baby or having the periods to allow that to happen, if that makes any sense. So to kind of summarise those things that I did, I was able to take a focus off obsessing around rituals, routines, such as obsessively exercising and work. I started to do more creative things in life, such as drawing, painting, blogging, writing in my spare time, as well as reading. And that combined with lifting the restrictions off completely. And even if you are vegan or vegetarian for now, maybe you could experiment with just allowing some animal products back into your diet to see how you feel about that. And I always think to remember this is that if you do want to do veganism or vegetarianism for ethical reasons, you can always go back to that once you are physically well. Or if you never want to go back to that again, that's completely fine too, because ultimately you have to put your health first and foremost. Even if you are a healthy weight now and have a period, and you might have gone through a stage of restriction but getting your periods back, and you feel as though, well, I've done all the work then also don't stop recovery just because you've got your periods back, because I can hand on heart say that just because I got my period back didn't mean that I didn't have work to do, because even though I'd lifted the lid off on my restrictions and started to pull them apart and work on them, I still had a lot to work on over the course of the next few years. And recovery is a long journey, and it doesn't happen overnight. And getting your period back might just be one part of the journey, but it's a very important part if you're a woman, especially if you want to be able to experience your true emotions again. Because for me, once I got my period back, I was hit in the face with this overwhelming amount of emotion, and I had to deal with that without turning back to the restriction of anorexia and using old coping mechanisms. And maybe that's a topic for another video, but I think it's important that regardless of if you have a period or not, is to still continue with recovery and also trying to live a life that's in line with who you want to be and not what you want to look like or how you want your perfect diet to be, because that's not what life is, and that's not what living life to the full is. So to summarise this video and to give you some advice, I'd just like for you to just reflect on where you are at right now in your own recovery. And if you don't have a period at the moment, maybe you could write a few things down around, you know, if there are any current restrictions in your life, even if you're at a healthy weight now, what things are you doing or worrying about that might be preventing you from having your period or reclaiming it back? I also have a topic about this, about periods and getting them back, in my new workbook that's called Gaining Weight and Reclaiming Life in Eating Disorder Recovery. So I have a full section about reclaiming life and getting your period back in there, and I'll link that into the description and comments below if you'd like to take a look. But fundamentally, most importantly, is just take the time of day to just sit down by yourself, get yourself a cup of tea and think, what is it in my life that might be making me run on restrictive mode, and is that in some way contributing to my lack of periods? Even if I feel like I'm having enough nutrients and I'm having enough energy, like hormones and periods are such a very complex thing, beyond sometimes what we can consciously ever hope to understand. And ultimately, your body knows best. So if you don't have a period, there's a reason why that is, and it may go beyond weight. So there's lots of work that needs to be done and explored. And just see your recovery as an experiment. And when you do, the pressure starts to feel a little bit less, and you can start to have a little bit more fun in recovery as well. So I hope this video has been helpful. Again, if you've got any ideas or comments around your experience of getting your period back or not having a period back in eating disorder recovery, I'd really like to hear about that down below. Also, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can do so, where I'm very active at Nourishing Routes. And please just feel free to message me anything or send me an email. I'd just really love to connect with you guys anyway. On that note, I hope you have a fab week. I hope this has been helpful, and hopefully I'll speak to you really soon.